Thanks for joining us, everybody. My name is Vaughn Jedry, and I'm president of Safely Productive Consulting. I wanted to talk to you about this today because safety red tape is still costing Canada in the neighborhood of $20 billion. So I'll just start off by asking a simple question. If you're a contractor, if you're a welder, a safety manager, any employer really, and if you want to work in more than one Canadian province, how many times should you have to prove that you know what you're doing? In Canada, the answer is as many provinces that you want to work in. The same welder, the same skills, the same pipeline, 4 provinces. That's 4 sets of tests, 4 separate safety certifications, 4 workers' compensation registrations, and if you want a core certificate, that's 4 of those too. So Canada has got really big plans around building one national economy, nation building projects, competing in the world. But we have to agree first on what a hard hat standard looks like in our own country. So the International Monetary Fund says that by removing Canada's internal trade barriers, the walls that we built against ourselves, that we could add $210 billion to our GDP. So today we're going to talk about one specific piece of that problem, and it's really occupational health and safety. We'll talk about some things that really need to be scrutinized and who actually has the power to make the real change. The reality is that the federal government has moved faster in the last 12 months, really, than it has in decades, and that's worth talking about and really understanding what's been happening. In January of 2025, the federal government renewed its focus on eliminating internal trade barriers, partly in response to American tariff threats, partly because economists have been shouting about this problem for years. In June 2025, the House of Commons passed Bill C-5, and that's the One Canadian Economy Act, and it received a royal assent on June 26th. The legislation has 2 parts, really. The first is the Free Trade and Labor Mobility in Canada Act, which removes those federal barriers to interprovincial trade, and the Building Canada Act, which fast tracks the approval for national projects of interest. In November 2025, a Canadian Mutual Recognition Agreement was signed by the federal government, all 10 provinces, and the territories, ensuring that a product certified in one of the provinces would be accepted in all others. And on January the 1st, 2026, the Free Trade and Labor Mobility Act came into force. At the same time, Ontario launched as of right labor mobility rules, meaning that an actual certified professional from another province can begin working in Ontario within 10 days of applying, rather than the usual 6 months. So the political will seems to be there. The legislation exists. The question is, does any of this actually fix the day-to-day nightmare that employers and workers navigating the system are facing? And I think that's really where we need to get specific. So here's the foundational problem. Under Canada's Constitution, labor regulation, including occupational health and safety, is primarily a provincial responsibility. So that means that we don't have one OH&S system, we have 14 of them, each one with its own Occupational Health and Safety Act and regulation, its own enforcement body, its own inspection priorities, its own penalties, and its own definitions. So even the word workplace or the word employer, the word hazard, these are foundational terms in health and safety, and depending on the province that you're standing in, there could be a drastically different definition of what that means. So now the federal government has signed not 1 but 2 reconciliation agreements. The goal of these documents was really to commit to the harmonizing of specific technical standards across all of these jurisdictions. So things like fall protection equipment, hearing protection, hard hats, safety boots, eye protection. These commitments were made years ago, and the federal government's 2025 to 2027 regulatory plan is only now beginning to implement them. Industry experts at that time were already raising some alarms because the training is built on the regulation. If the regulations are inconsistent, then the training is going to be inconsistent. So, next piece of it, CORE, Certificate of Recognition. So it's supposed to be Canada's official national standard for employer health and safety management systems. And the idea is that a company builds a robust health and safety system and gets audited against a national framework and earns a certificate that proves it. Good, great. Here's the problem. A CORE from Alberta does not automatically work in BC. A CORE from BC is not automatically accepted in Saskatchewan. In PEI, Prince Edward Island doesn't even participate in the CORE program at all. And it's the only province in Canada that doesn't recognize CORE. So a contractor working in Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan, and Ontario needs 4 separate CORE certifications, 4 separate external audits, each one costing thousands of dollars in auditor fees, staff time, and program documentation, against the same national framework for the same safety management system every single year. So the infrastructure for a national CORE mutual recognition already exists. The national framework is already there, and what's missing is a formal agreement between provinces to just simply accept each other's certificates. It's a political problem masquerading as a technical one. So, everybody's favorite topic, not really, but let's talk about workers' compensation. And this one's a bit more nuanced. All of Canada's workers' compensation boards have signed something called the Interjurisdictional Agreement, or the IJA, which determines that provincial boards cover a worker if they're injured while temporarily in another province, and prevents employers from being double charged. And that's good. That works. But here's the problem that the IJA doesn't fix. Premium rates are different in every province. Safety incentive rebates and those programs are different in every province. A Manitoba CORE certified employer gets a 15% rebate on their WCB assessment. Alberta has its own structure. Ontario has another one. There's no standardization there either. And critically, a company's injury record in Alberta doesn't follow it to BC for BC premium rating purposes. Your safety performance history, the one that you built over many years of careful work, essentially resets every time you cross a provincial border. So that's not really a system, that's a penalty for being a national business. Any harmonized standards has to work for union and non-union workers equally. And labor advocates are issuing a warning. Harmonization must mean standardizing to the highest existing provincial standard, not the lowest common denominator. These OH&S standards were not invented in a boardroom. They were built in response to real tragedies: mining disasters, construction accidents, industrial exposures. Weakening them in the name of efficiency isn't harmonization, it's regression. So, what can actually be done? The first one is a national CORE mutual recognition. Use the FTA framework and the new Canadian Mutual Recognition Agreement to require that a CORE certificate issued in any province is automatically accepted in every other province. The national standard already exists. The audit framework already exists. The second one is a national OH&S digital passport or something along that line, really to create a government-backed portable credential wallet where workers can install all of their provincially issued certifications like WMIS, ball arrest, working at heights, first aid, CORE. Any employer anywhere in Canada can verify in real time. Next is a single WCB registration for national projects. For federally designated projects of national interest, allow a single workers' compensation registration with the employer's home province with a revenue sharing formula of some type, distributing premiums proportionally to where the work is performed. The IJA already governs which board handles the claims. extend that principle to simplify the registration and premium administration. If the federal government is serious about a one Canadian economy, serious about projects of national interest, and serious about getting pipelines and terminals and transmission lines built, why can't it just legislate OH&S harmonization? The federal government's job is not to override the provinces. It's to create a framework where harmonization is rational, economically rewarding, and where resistance comes with a cost. So let me leave you with this. The federal government has declared that certain projects like pipelines, LNG terminals, transmission lines, ports, mines are projects of national interest. They're saying that these are worth fast-tracking approvals. They're worth cutting red tape. They're worth overriding the usual 5-year review process. The Canadian economy needs these projects, and the workers who build them need them. But here's the question we need to ask out loud and in public. If a pipeline is a project of national interest, if building an LNG terminal is a project of national interest, then the welder who builds that pipeline, who works at heights on that terminal, and whose safety certificate should be recognized from Halifax to Fort St. John, that worker also is a person of national interest. So why are we making them test for the same skills 4 different times? Tools exist, legislation exists, political momentum is higher than we've ever seen it. The question is whether we use this moment or spend the next decade having the same conversations. And I really believe Canada is better than this. Our workers absolutely deserve better than this. And our economy absolutely can't afford anything less.